Good evening. I'm Dr. Diana Barroso, Director of the Master's Programs in Psychology at Albizu University, and would like to extend a warm welcome to all of our students, faculty, alumni, students from other universities who have joined us as well, special guests from our Practicum Sites network. Thank you for all that you do to train our students in their last phase of their degree program. It's very much appreciated. We are very happy to put on our 12th annual Mental Health Awareness event. This is an event that we do every year to be able to create consciousness about a number of issues that are of relevance in the field at the moment. And this year we have the treat of having our very own mental health counseling coordinator, Dr. Tania Diaz, present. Dr. Diaz is a licensed psychologist and also a board qualified supervisor for mental health counseling students. She has had several appointments in higher education with Nova University and Union Institute previously, and has been associated with Albizu University over 20 years. She also maintains a private practice in the Miami Lakes area dealing with populations across the lifespan. She's a certified hard math trainer, and she has appeared on numerous shows in the media talking about several of her specialties, such as information about ADHD, bullying, self-mutilation in adolescents, and other topics of interest to the mental health community. So I think all of us can relate, because the first thing I'm going to tell you as a housekeeping rule is to put your cell phones on vibrating mode so that we don't get interrupted while her lecture is going on. And I think we can all relate to dealing with technology in our lives constantly, with the cell phones that we have, the tablets, the computers, the towers that are tracking everything we do, right? They can't even hear what we say in the planes now. It's like, what? How can they do that? But they do. And some other things that we don't know and we prefer not to think about, maybe. But technology is here to stay. And we are seeing more and more proliferation of devices and software and databases, and even ways of conducting business that are quite new. And we can only predict that in the near future, our use of technology will continue to increase. However, the gap between our understanding of how that technology affects us, influences, and interacts with our environment and us is not as clear. But researchers are beginning to pay attention to many aspects of that bi-directional, two-way kind of relationship, whereby we affect the technology that is being produced, and the technology is also affecting the way that we behave, we carry out our relationships, and we go about our business in the world. When we used to see Star Trek episodes, we had no idea that we would actually be flipping out phones, asking the computer to do things. And this is now true, and it happens every day, and we are not surprised. And we will be able to do more and more. And some effects are positive and some are not so much. So Dr. Diaz is going to enlighten us about some of the information of the latest research that is coming out and how we can take steps to have a better relationship with how that technology is interacting with us. Albizu University has been in Puerto Rico since 1966 and in Miami since 1980. We pride ourselves in delivering more personalized attention to our students. We always get questions about our programs. We are naming honor of our founder, Dr. Carlos Albizu Miranda, who was a renowned Puerto Rican psychologist, educated here at Purdue University and a veteran of the war, and somebody who decided to leave a legacy to his country, Puerto Rico, by establishing a school of professional psychology where, at the time, all of the mental health counselors and psychologists were trained outside of the island, bringing, in doing that, the perspective of sensitivity to different cultures. And this is something that we infuse in our programs here, and that Dr. Albizu was instrumental in bringing also to the APA, and also as the first Hispanic to be the president of the Hispanic Association of Psychologists. This is a little bit of a background because I usually get questions. If anybody has a particular inquiry about a program or anything that we do, please feel free to approach me or Dr. Diaz at the break. Some housekeeping rules before we bring Dr. Diaz. I want to give heartfelt thank you to our assistants, Jose Morales and Natalia Acosta, who are in the back, without whom we couldn't have had this event. So well organized. Thank you for all that you do every day, and thank you in particular for what you have done for this event. We are very appreciative of that. For those of you who are licensed professionals, mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, clinical social workers, or psychologists with a license, and you're here because we invited you to receive 3 complimentary continuing education units for your licenses, please make sure that you see our assistants in the back at the end, as you need to sign our attendance form so that we can process those CEUs. If you need to exit at any point during the lecture, please try to do it as quietly as possible and then come back. I don't know if Dr. Diaz might take a break, but she will be in charge from now until 9 when we're done. So without further ado, Dr. Diaz, please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the audience is yours.
Wonderful. Let me turn this on. Hello? Good evening. Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Barroso, for such a warm welcome. And I just want to go ahead and thank each and every one of you. Every single time that we give these presentations and these events, I love to see the alumni amongst the audience and speak to the graduates to see where they are now during their post-graduation experience. And it's always, always refreshing. It always puts a smile on my face to hear you were talking, you were giving a presentation at my alma mater, and I wanted to come. And it's not about me, it's about the culture that we create at Carlos Albizu University. Small institution, and it's very much like a family to a certain degree. So, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and touch a little bit, like Dr. Barroso was saying, on the importance of technology. And there's a story behind this, because I gave a very similar presentation at the Florida Mental Health Counseling Association. Earlier this year. And I had an image or a vision. I wanted to go ahead and speak on heart rhythm technology, and that was last year's presentation, if some of you recall. And they said, Dr. Diaz, you can give a presentation on anything you want. And I said, yes, heart rhythm technology, because I'm a certified trainer, and that's what I want to do. It's one of my fortes. And they said, well, can you put a little spin on the importance of research? And I said, sure. So I started researching, and I started getting curious. And during my exploration of all the materials, I kept stumbling amongst technology again and again and again. It's everywhere, and yet very few people are actually talking about some of the negative implications of technology. Now, technology has great things, and we don't want it to ever go away. However, we just can't talk about all of the benefits without acting in a responsible manner and becoming informed in an effort to safeguard against some of the, again, bidirectional implications. Does that make sense? So today, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk a little bit about the research behind it, how science actually is married to the concept of research, and the impact of technology, not only on the human anatomy, but in our overall environment. So simply, its research is simply defined by what we do is we collect information. We collect information to do what? In order to draw up some conclusions. Conclusions that really drive at the bottom of what we call truth. Everybody's truth is very specific to their own kind of belief systems and so forth. But we have a tendency to need to know where does this stem from, and how we actually do it, okay, is through a very rigorous inquiry. But we need tangible evidence. We need physical outcomes. So we employ the use of science. Science has many definitions, but by short, we have an intellectual and systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through the observation and experiment. We not only have to see it, but we have to measure it. We have to weigh it. We have to feel it. So I'm going to talk first and foremost about some of our forefathers and some of the early research experiments that they did that later were actually proven to be invalid. So most of you will probably remember from Psychology 101, Cannon. Now, Cannon, he was a physiologist, okay, and he was mostly known for establishing the concept of the fight or flight response. He expanded on the concept of homeostasis. He basically believed that our heart rate variability was actually best to be at a resting condition. Why? Because that was correlated with health. So not too much movement. We wanted to just be calm, be restful. And his theory was actually later proven to be inaccurate or incorrect. Along came John Lacey. Now, Lacey in turn, okay, he got curious and he started asking a lot of thought-provoking questions. Thought-provoking questions such as, well, why does one person get sick and the other person doesn't? What makes you more resilient than you? And as a result, his passion was in researching cancer, okay? Cancer, and he spent most of his life and research dedicated to working at the Phelps Institute for Cancer Research and Molecular Biology along with his wife, Beatrice. Okay, so based on his research, in 1974, you had some French researchers that started reading up about his research, and they springboard into also very curious work. What did they do? They started to do research with cats. And what they started to do is they started to stimulate, okay, the vagus nervous system within cats. And the vagus nervous system is the 10th cranial nerve that connects the parasympathetic nervous system, which connects the brain, the heart, and the gut. Has anybody ever heard of the 3 brains? Okay, second brain. Okay, sometimes people refer to second brain as the gut. Okay, now we know that there are 3 brains. You have the original, you have the heart, and you have the gut. And they are all connected. And what the researchers found in 1974 is that when they would start to stimulate the vagus nervous system, what would happen is that the level of brain activity would reduce. And so they concluded, because everything is connected, that some of the activity within the actual heart, the heart was sending information to the brain, and as long as they started to stimulate that nerve, then the reduction of activity in the brain would quell. So, further along the line came Dr. Amour, cardiologist. His purpose, his passion, his curiosity was in cardiac arrhythmias. Why is that important? Because now is when we start to introduce the concept of technology. Because he said, we need to quantify it, we need to measure it. All of these hypotheses is great, but we need outcomes, measurable outcomes. And so what he ended up doing, he developed a team of physicians, scientists, psychologists, and he created teams to actually create the electrophysiological instrumentation to be able to study the extrinsic and the intrinsic functions of the human heart. And what did they find? What they found was that the heart has a nervous system, a little itty bitty nervous system, and once that nervous system is actually stimulated, Okay? It travels up through the vagus nervous system prior to 1974, that was previously established, and up to the brain. So what happens when people get nervous? The heart starts beating, am I right? And so if the brain and the heart are in direct communication, but if the heart is actually sending more information to the brain, then what's happening? It's feeding in information, okay, that is hyperarousing the actual brain. Part of the brain that serves to become hyperactive would be the amygdala. And so what we found was that the amygdala is synchronized to the heart. And so through certain protocols, we can actually control our heart rate variability. And if we slow down our heart rate variability, we send messages to the brain that says everything is okay, everything is calm. Because when our heart is doing this, okay, we go into fight or flight or freeze response. Everybody's familiar with that, especially if you're working with trauma. So his research led us to understand that, yes, it has a nervous system, but that nervous system also has the capacity to learn. It has short-term and long-term memory. We're looking at a bidirectional communication where at times the heart can actually send more information to the brain than the brain actually to the heart. This is something of a treat, just like a little footnote, if you will. Did everyone know that the heart begins to beat in an unborn fetus before the brain is formed? Okay, good. How come there's so much emphasis on brain activity? Because when you're looking at the research and the books and so forth, it's all about the brain, am I right? Okay. So let's talk about some of the features of the heart. Here we have an image of a ganglia cell within the walls of the heart. And what we found as we took a sample within the walls of the heart, not only do ganglia cells exist, but neurotransmitters, protein cells, support cells, and 40,000 neurons. They're also called sensory neurites. What are sensory neurites? Sensory neurites have the propensity to kind of sense before we actually have the experience. How many of you have ever had a hunch, a feeling? Yeah? You're thinking about a person, and all of a sudden the phone rings. Okay? Well, they've done experiments where you have a computer screen, and you have flashes of either aversive stimuli, like a snake or violent blood, and then you have really kind of soothing stimuli pop up, such as kittens and puppies and smiling children playing. Yeah? And then we had individuals hooked up to these monitors, and of course you had the researchers as observers taking notes. And what they learned is that the heart rate would adjust itself 3 to 5 seconds before the actual negative image would pop up in order to avoid a visceral response. So the heart actually adjusted itself in anticipation of the negative experience. This gives credence to the living systems theory. Let me tell you about the living systems theory. How many of you work with trauma? Raise your hand. Yeah. Trauma. Yep. Okay. So those of you who work with trauma know that trauma is also stored at the level of the cell. This is what cell theory is all about. And that's why they pull in additional resources in addition to talk therapy. They pull in acupuncture, they pull in yoga, they pull in sometimes meditation, depending on the trauma, yeah? In order to accent the talk therapy. Because when the person becomes activated through environmental stimuli, what takes place is the amygdala starts to become inflamed. When the amygdala starts to become inflamed, the prefrontal cortex, what happens to it? Goes offline, correct, all right? And so, with that being said, this supports the living cell systems. Those of you who are not working with trauma, how many of you are athletes? At least go to the gym once in a while. Okay. Beautiful. That works too. You know, if you actually work out, or in your younger years had worked out, developed a little muscle tone and so forth, it's going to be easier for you to regain that muscle tone than if you've never worked out again. And this is what we call muscle memory. Okay? So, has anybody ever read the book, The Body Knows the Score? Yes. Again, cell theory. Yeah? In these cases, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to talk to you just are examples of Dr. Purcell's work. He's an American cardiologist, and what he did was he started to find really kind of unique experiences with his patients post-transplant. And he started to sort of collect the data, started to write this book called The Heart's Code. And I took 3 cases from The Heart's Code in order to exemplify, okay, the living cell theory. The first case is that of Claire Sylvia. Now, Claire Sylvia, after she had a heart transplant, started to experience these dreams, very, very vivid recurring dreams about this gentleman by the name of Tim L. And she had a feeling, or a knowing, if you will, that this was her donor. In addition, she had an extraordinary amount of desire, if you will, for beer, chicken McNuggets, and cream peppers, none of which she ever liked before. Well, that was interesting. So, nudged by a fellow friend, if you will, she was encouraged to kind of seek him out, even though donors, I guess, identities are maintained for obvious psychological reasons. So, what Sylvia did was she only went by the very, very limited information that she was given. He lives in a nearby town, and he died of a motorcycle accident. So she looked in the obituaries. She was able to narrow it down. Indeed, there was a gentleman by the name of Tim, and he was 17 years old. So she looked up his family, knocked on the family's door, had a little bit of a talk and so forth, found out that he was a beer connoisseur, loved his beer, loved fried chicken, and green peppers. Now, how many of you remember Archie Bunker? Some of you are too young for Archie Bunker. Okay. But this kind of older gentleman, a little bit on the racist side, a lot on the racist side, and very kind of narrow-minded, if you will. So you have, let's just call him Archie. So Archie, he was a foundry worker. And right after his heart transplant, all of a sudden developed an affinity for classical music. Now Archie was given a heart of a young, 16-and-a-half African-American male. Archie had a problem with that. Being Archie. And his wife was beside herself. But in short, he didn't make the connection because he had received the heart of an African-American male, that his sudden desire for classical music was somehow correlated to his new heart. But little did Archie know that this young man who gave his heart actually was a violinist. And he was killed during a drive-by on his way to violin classes. The third, which exemplifies living systems theory, is probably one of the most earth-shattering, very, very moving. It's a story about a 8-year-old little girl who received a heart from a 10-year-old murder victim. And shortly thereafter, she started having very vivid nightmares. So, what do the parents do? They take her to a psychiatrist. After a couple of sessions, says, no, this is too consistent, too vivid, too detailed, and we need to contact the authorities because this nightly, it's tangible, So they went to the authorities, and the authorities at the time did not convict the actual murderer that was originally a suspect because they didn't have enough tangible proof. But the authorities agreed to call the subject back in. The little girl was able to identify the location of the murder, the time of the murder, the clothes that the little girl had on, the clothes that her assailant had on, and the word that the little girl uttered before she was killed. So they had enough evidence that when the suspect was presented with it, he signed a confession. Yeah? All right. And this is
Sylvia Claire's book.
It's endorsed by,
Some
of you might know.
Some of you might know.
I don't know him personally. I would
I don't know
love
him
to.
personally. I would love to at some point in time.
It's a story that must be
It's a story that
told
must be
fascinating
told
example
her,
of
fascinating
how
example of how cellular
memory
memory can outlive physical death.
All right, so in 1983,
All right, so in 1983,
the heart was reclassified as a hormonal gland.
Why a hormonal gland?
Hormonal gland
Hormonal gland because
how?
it pumps out oxytocin. That's like the
love
attachment,
bonding
love bonding
In
hormone.
addition,
it also
out
pumps out
epinephrine,
norepinephrine,
serotonin,
serotonin,
Those are
dopamine.
all found where?
Those are all found where?
In the brain.
In the brain.
So
Okay.
there
So there is an
extraordinary
extraordinary
similarity
between
between the brain and
the
the heart.
brain and the
It also
heart. It also
comes
comes
out
out
DHEA.
DHEA. This is stuff
Okay?
you want.
This is
Okay?
vitality.
This is vitality.
And last but not least,
And last but not
we
least,
don't
is
want
what we
cortisol,
don't want is the
which has a
cortisol,
direct
which has a
implication
direct
on
implication on your organs
associated
long-term,
with stress.
associated with stress.
So we know so far
So we
that
know
the
so far that the
heart
heart
communicates
communicates
out of the
in
four ways.
two out of the
We've
four ways.
discussed this already.
Discussed this already.
Nervous system, hormonally,
but it also creates
every
a
single
pulse
time
wave.
that your
Every single time that
heart
your heart
beats,
beats,
it
it creates actual pulse wave. And then the
wave
pulse
starts to
wave
generate what we call electromagnetic field. How many people in this room know that we are made of electricity? Raise your hand. See, everybody's hand in this room should have been up. And I'll tell you why. I'm going to break it down real easy. Every single cell in your body needs electricity to communicate with your nervous system. Your nervous system then starts to ping and starts to communicate to the rest of your body, and this gives you the opportunity and the ability to not only speak and talk and think, but move, you see? So, what happens from the emissions of technology when that technology starts to interfere or interrupt with the natural flow of our own electrical current? It's going to cause some level of friction. Am I right? Okay. And you're looking at various degrees of friction. No worries. I'm going to talk to you about the differences, the short-term and the potential long-term effects. So we've reached now the area where we're going to talk about technology. And there's many different forms of technology. I'm going to read this definition. I'm going to then pose a question to the general audience. Technology, as I chose to kind of fuse definitions, is recognized as a body of knowledge devoted to creating tools to simplify our daily lives and considered an application of science used to accomplish specific tasks or solve world problems. How many of you think technology is solving world problems? Raise your hand. How many people believe that it is adding to world problems? Raise your hand. How many believe that it has a dual effect? Me too. Me too. But with that being said, we need to be responsible. We need to be informed about technology. And that's why I'm not going to tell you all the bad stuff about technology. I'm a fan of technology, but I'm going to talk to you about the good aspects of it and the benefits, as well as some of the downsides, which are also known as electromagnetic frequencies and the differing variations of those frequencies. So let's talk a little bit about HeartMath. Very briefly, international independent research organization. And their goal is to study the physiology of coherence. What is coherence? I'm glad you asked. Coherence is simply just an optimal state of functioning. This is when your brain and your heart are in alignment, okay? So remember that the amygdala is synchronized to your heart. If your heart is exhibiting irregular patterns, then your brain is also, how do you say, what is it? Hyperactive. It's not operating at its optimal capacity, okay? So when you're in a state of coherence, you're in the zone, let's just say, okay? Have you ever experienced a zone, whether you're an athlete or not? Have you ever had a one day where everything just flows? Yeah? You hit every green light. Yeah, yeah. You find the perfect parking spot, right? You walk in and your boss smiles at you. It's great. Okay. This is coherence, yeah? Optimal functioning. And so this little graph just illustrates, okay, the distinctions between being incoherent and coherent, because the thalamus is your relay station. And so what happens to the thalamus when your heart and your mind and your brain are not in alignment? What happens, it interrupts and it doesn't let it do its job properly, okay? And as a result, it inhibits brain function. Whereas if you have higher levels of coherence and you're in alignment, it facilitates brain functioning. Now this chart here is what we call heart rate variability. The average heartbeat is about 70 beats per minute. And that's just the heartbeat. But the spaces in between is what we refer to as heart rate variability. Is it better to have greater heart rate variability for our health? Yes or no? Absolutely, because Cannon said a long time ago, land far, far away, no. We want to keep it nice and steady. Everybody just relax. Have you ever seen that little video of the little girl? Just be low, be low. You know what I'm talking about? No? Oh, you do. Somebody does. I'm not the only weird one. Good. All right. So this is simply just one slide. What technology based on the heart math research has done is that they've created an instrument where you're able to graph and you're able to show the actual progress of a series of, variability episodes, if you will. And this is how you know that the individual is making progress or they're not. This, again, exemplifies the distinction, but here they also found that negative emotions are usually associated with incoherence. Emotions such as frustration, anger, anxiety, worry, and positive emotions are associated or correlated with higher optimal performance. What does this actually do when you are engaged in this kind of capacity? You create a space where you're able, to respond as opposed to react. So they ran several experiments, and one of the experiments they did was with police officers. Now, the Heart Math Institute has done a lot of research with NASA, with police officers, EMTs, teachers. But in this case, the experiment I'm showing is done with police officers. And what they did was they did a pre and post scenario. The police officers had their heart math monitors or heart monitors on, and they ran them through scenarios of domestic violence, okay? And so, again, 70 beats per minute is about your resting condition, average number of beats. And so when they introduced the domestic violence scenario, the police officer's heart shot up to 170 beats per minute, which is almost twice as much. And it took them an extraordinary amount of time in order to decrease their heart rate variability all on their own, independent of any training. It took some several hours, some it took 3 hours, some it took 5 hours. Some didn't have their heart rate come down even after the experiment was over, and it took them 24 hours, yeah? Then they ran the experiment again, but 3 weeks later. So they gave them 2 weeks in order to go ahead and learn the heart math principles. They did an alternative form of domestic scenario or domestic violence scenario. And then they instructed them to go into coherence. And when they instructed them to go into coherence, we take a look here, and it took them from 44 to probably about 54, 10, 15 minutes tops to go from 170 to about 70, okay, which is their normal resting rate. 15 minutes when compared to several hours employing the heart math protocol. So they said, you know what? Okay, that was pretty aggressive. Let's see if we don't use an aggressive experiment. And let's see how it's also correlated with brain activity. So they went ahead and they had a mother, and she had an kind of like the little, sensors for electroencephalogram kind of placed on her temples. And then the baby that was in the same room, but they weren't touching, had a little baby heart monitor. They weren't touching, they were about maybe 2 feet away from each other, and then all of a sudden the mother was instructed to go ahead and just think positive thoughts about her baby while she looked at the baby. And what do you think happened? The mother's brain waves and the baby's heart waves synchronized. Remember what I spoke to you about earlier, about the pulse, about the electromagnetic field. Magnometers, through the use of technology, are able to measure the actual heart electromagnetic field, which extends approximately about 3 feet out. And the brain, usually about 1 inch out. So if I am about this far from you, we are actually sharing the same electromagnetic field. It's intercrossing or interrelating, right? So they went further to do environmental studies, okay, in groups. And they said, well, let's see if one person or maybe 2 or 3 people can actually affect a 4th person within their environment. 10 groups, 4 in each group, each at a table. Everybody has a little monitor on. Now, 3 of those individuals know the heart math interventions and protocols, and they've been trained for approximately 2 weeks. 4th one, no clue. They're doing mundane tasks. And on cue, 3 of them were asked to go into coherence. So they started to practice their breathing as instructed by the Heart Math Institute. Guess what happened to the 4th person? He starts to go into coherence. Okay? So the outcome is that 3 individuals were able to energetically manipulate that 4th person's electromagnetic frequency. Isn't that cool? Stay tuned, there's more. So this is the Heart Math Institute technology, if you will. Okay, I use it in my private practice. Over here, you're going to have like sensors, and the sensor goes right into your earlobe, and it attaches to the computer. It comes also in a form of, what do you call it, your own personal one, which you can use on your iPhone or on your Androids. And it has a mood diary, it has ability to do notes, but more importantly, it has an ability to track. And when you track, okay, it is cloud-based. So you get a password, and if you're, willing to give access to your therapist is also able to track your progress. So it's kind of cool, yeah? Bless you. Now, this is what I was mentioning to you before about the central nervous system, that every cell really is charged with electricity. But even if you still don't believe me, it's okay. How many people have either experienced it for themselves or know of someone, especially in the Northeast? When you go up to somebody by accident, you touch either someone or a metal, and you actually see the shock. And you feel it too. Yeah. And you're like, I was doubting Thomas, now I'm not. Okay? All right. Because that is our natural electrical magnetic current. So why does that actually happen? It happens because there's usually an accumulation of positive protons in your body. And the person that you're touching, or the doorknob, and conduction is usually greater in cold climates, has less positive protons and electrons, okay? So the ones that have more are actually jumping, okay, to the object that has less. Does that make sense? All right. Now, you don't have to believe me again. However, has anybody ever had an MRI done? Sure. Now, do you know how an MRI works? We will this evening, in 1 minute or less. This is what happens.
MRIs use protons, which are abundant in the human body. All protons spin, creating a small magnetic charge. When a strong magnetic field is introduced, as is the case in an MRI machine, the protons align with that field. The MRI technician then introduces a radio frequency pulse that disrupts the proton and forces it either into a 90-degree or 180-degree realignment with the static magnetic field. Since the radio frequency pulse pushed the proton against its nature, once this pulse is turned off, the protons realign with that magnetic field, releasing electromagnetic energy along the way. The MRI is able to detect this energy and is able to differentiate various tissues based on how quickly they release energy after the pulse is turned off.
you get an image because there is a manipulation of those protons, and it forces it to go in a different direction, okay? This is by force and by choice. Now, all of you that said, I have had an MRI, how many of you have an MRI on a weekly basis? Exactly. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to show you, okay, the differing degrees of technology, because how many of you use your cell phones every single day? How many of you watch TV every single day? How many of you, just keep your hands up, how many of you use Wi-Fi every single day? Yeah? Okay. Tablets, yeah? iPods, headsets. We're flooded 24/7. And I'm going to go ahead and really elaborate on the physiology behind it in very simple terms. Very simple terms. So most of you know what an MRI is. Does anybody know what a superconducting quantum interface device is? It's called the SQUID. Okay. Any nurses? Any medical practitioners? All right. So there is a very slow and subtle shift from MRIs to SQUIDs. Why? Because they have ultra-low magnetic fields, except that it's very, very expensive. So it's a slow turning out process, okay? So we're slow to get them installed because of the cost. So this is simply the concept of electromagnetic fields that we've spoken about extensively, but let me show you now the differing degrees. And this is important because everybody thinks, a cell phone, that's not going to hurt me. Okay? But it's not a cell phone. It is the grand total of exposure by multiple devices over a prolonged period of time. Now, we need to see things, right? So you have on this chart ionizing and non-ionizing. Obviously, this is red. It's bad. You're looking at gamma rays. Gamma rays, your flesh just melts. But then we have X-rays, right? And X-rays, you have the technician kind of cover you up, okay, because they're working in it every single day. They cover themselves up. They go, ironically enough, they go behind a wall. A wall. Does Wi-Fi penetrate walls? Yes. But they find that to be safe. Okay, we'll see. Now, in terms of non-ionizing, you have lower degrees of frequency and radiation. So, let me break it down to you very, very simple. Everybody knows that the DNA is the fabric of our physiology. What supports the DNA are molecular structures. What supports the molecular structures are atoms, right, at the very bottom. Now you have atoms that are bonded together, create molecules, molecules create DNA. Got? Great. What happens when you have AM radios, TVs, Wi-Fi, everything flooding 24 hours a day? It sends out a current, a frequency. That frequency is not in line with ours. It starts to resist and vibrate. These atoms start to shake, and they shake for a long time until they break. And so when you break the bonds between atoms, what happens to the molecules? Disintegrates, right? It starts to disintegrate. And what happens ultimately if you have enough molecules disintegrating? You are altering your DNA. Electromagnetic energy strips atoms and molecules from the tissue and alters chemical reactions in the body, converting molecules into ions. This is science. I want to show you just a personal story about Jeremy Johnson. Used to work at Silicon Valley out in California. Was around technology 24/7. And he started to become sick. And he then turned as a technology health advocate because of his experience. Now, I want to preface it with one caveat. Because when we, as mental health professionals, treat the individual, we always have to account for individual differences. Am I right? You're not going to treat one person exactly the same, even if you're doing behavioral analysis, because you got to find out what works for that child. Am I right? Everybody has a common denominator, empirically based strategies, but it's really about your client, and they are going to lead you. So why am I telling you this? That's because certain individuals are more susceptible to electromagnetic frequencies than others. And that's why there's this erratic, kind of inconclusive, spotty, inconsistent turning out of outcomes. But bear this in mind. Technology is growing so quickly, so rapidly, that we don't have the longitudinal studies enough to have that level of consistency and accuracy that we're looking for. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me show you a little clip about Jeremy.
So I'd like to begin by asking a few questions. Who knows if they have a wireless smart meter on their home? Okay. And who has their smartphone in their pocket right now? Great. And who's read the fine print in your owner's manual that says that the smartphone should never be within about an inch of the body? So today, I'm going to speak to why we can no longer assume that our wireless technology is safe. Technology has allowed us many benefits. It's connected us to people and to places, and it's brought us convenience that few could have imagined just 10 years ago. It's also brought us tremendous economic benefits. If we can look at how technology has increased in our lives in just the last 8 years, it started with the iPhone, and then tablet computing, ubiquitous Wi-Fi, the smart meter and the smart home, and wearable tech, and now the Internet of Things. If we could imagine how this would look, it would actually look like this. This is an artist's rendition of what Wi-Fi in our public spaces looks like. We could actually hear what microwave radiation sounds like with a device like this. So if anybody would like to hear what their smartphone or their smartwatch sounds like, come and see me at the end, and I can show you. But how does this affect our bodies? That's the question I want to ask, because this exponential rise in microwave radiation can have effects. And that's what scientists and medical doctors around the world are now saying, especially when it comes to children, because they're going to be affected by this their entire lives. But today I also want to share a few solutions. I want to give everyone here things that you can do in your own lives in order to reduce this type of exposure. So I actually got into this topic about 5 years ago. Before then, I was a young technology enthusiast. I always used my smartphone and Wi-Fi. I've worked in Silicon Valley and have a master's degree in engineering. So if anyone had told me that wireless technology could have health effects, I would have thought they're crazy. So if you're thinking that right now, I can relate. But this all changed for me over the period of about 1 week. And I started to experience headaches, ringing in the ears, insomnia, and a fatigue and brain fog that I'd never experienced before. And I shared this with a colleague at work, and she said, you know, the exact same thing happened to her husband when a wireless smart meter was installed in their home. So I went home that evening, and I checked downstairs, and sure enough, we had a bank of wireless smart meters installed right below our bedroom in San Francisco. So this started me on a journey to learn as much about this topic as I possibly could. I now have a website about this, and I'm contacted by people all around the world every day who are experiencing the exact same things. It can be when they have a wireless smart meter installed, or a new Wi-Fi router, or even a cell tower placed across the street from their home. These are the common symptoms that people start to experience. This is actually from a published paper on the health effects of wireless smart meters. So, just here in the Bay Area, I'm in touch with dozens of people who've had their lives changed by this. Medical doctors, high school principals, teachers and students, IT professionals, and even entrepreneurs. These are people who had a normal life, and then over a short period of time, went to where they could no longer work, where they could no longer go to an office. Some of them actually have had to move out of their homes because they can't be in an environment which is normal now for most people. I've been in touch with people around the world who've become homeless because of this. There's many people that's actually happened to. And unfortunately, I know of people who've actually taken their lives because there's essentially no place they can go. And this is something that society does not yet recognize. My own life has been tremendously changed by this. After that first exposure to wireless smart meters, now I can no longer be in an environment with strong Wi-Fi for very long. So I can't go to my work the way I used to be able to. Most environments are now essentially toxic to me. So even finding a safe place to live has become very difficult. Imagine not being able to live in an apartment building where everyone has Wi-Fi, or to be able to live next to a cell tower. This is actually a proposed cell tower here in Berkeley. The residents have actually stopped it for now, but most churches and most schools now have cell towers on them. And so it exposes the people around them and, of course, the students who go to those schools. This is a cell tower in San Francisco. That brown thimble on top of the telephone pole is a cell tower. And these are being placed every couple blocks. So you could have an amazing home, and then one week, a company can come and put a cell tower right outside your window. So this is something that's happening throughout the Bay Area, and it's going to be happening throughout the United States. So it makes it so that people like myself have a hard time finding a place to live, but it also is ratcheting up the exposure of the entire population. So you might be asking, perhaps some people are being injured by this, but if you're not feeling it, it's probably not that big of a deal. And I think that's a very common experience. But it's not as simple as saying that just a few unfortunate people are being affected by this. Because what the science shows is that we're all affected on some level, whether we can feel it or not. And the reason is because essentially our bodies are electric. Every cell in our body communicates using tiny electric signals. It's how our nervous system operates. So to think that we could put an exponential amount of microwave radiation into our environment and not feel effects is simply false. To illustrate this, I actually had many friends come to me when I started to experience this, and they would say, "Jeremy, are you sure you aren't making this up in your head?" And I thought this too myself at the beginning. But then a year or two later, they would come to me and they'd say, "You won't believe it, but now I'm feeling pain in my arm when I use my cell phone, or when I put it to the head, or when a new Wi-Fi router is installed." So this is something where when people have more of an exposure, more people are being affected. And it's not just headaches and insomnia. It's much more serious things, such as infertility, DNA damage, and eventually cancer. This is what the research is starting to show. And you don't have to take my word for it. I encourage you to start researching this for yourselves. If you simply Google EMF research, this is a screenshot of what you'll find. The World Health Organization is the first link there, and they actually in 2011 came out and said this wireless technology is possibly carcinogenic. Now there's scientists around the world that say that it's most likely carcinogenic. The third link there is actually my own website. It's there because the last 5 years I've gathered research from around the world that shows that we now have enough evidence to at least take precaution when it comes to this technology. So, isn't this regulated? And this is one of the most interesting things I've found. The Federal Communications Commission is who is supposed to be regulating wireless technology. But if you look at the regulations, they're almost 20 years old. So that means our most advanced technology is using science that's at least 20 years old. But not only that, they're based on a concept which is nearly 50 years old, which says if microwave radiation does not heat us, then it can't possibly hurt us. But there's now hundreds of studies that show that this is false. So how is it that we have a regulatory body that's not protecting the public? Well, like many issues, like many public health issues in our country, you end up having industry influencing the regulatory body. And that's what's happening here. So you have a revolving door between the wireless lobby and the FCC Commission. So that's what's happening. Plus, the science is heavily influenced by industry funding. This is a study by Dr. Henry Lai. He looked at 326 studies based on the biological effects of cell phone radiation. He found that about half of the studies showed effects and half didn't. That's pretty normal for this type of research. But what he found that was interesting was that if you looked at who funded the studies, 70% of the independent studies showed effects, and only 32% of the industry-funded studies showed effects. So you see that there's an influence in money on this topic. Just like many other topics, tobacco is another one where essentially the industry funded science that was going to show their products were safe. So that's the bad news. And now I want to share some good news. And that is that there are solutions for this. We are going to have the industry start to create safer products, but there are ways that we can both protect ourselves and move industry forward. So one of the primary things we can do is to move towards fiber optics, because this is a way that we can make our homes safer, our businesses, and our schools. So fiber optics are safe, they're secure, and there's absolutely, they're one of the fastest things we can use. Another way we can go is to design products which are safer. So currently we have product designers and engineers working together, but we can bring in biophysicists and biologists to work together to create products that don't just emit right underneath the FCC regulations, but emit the least amount of any type of electromagnetic fields as possible. If smart meters had been designed to use either fiber optics or to emit just once or twice a day, rather than the 10,000 times they do emit, then I wouldn't be standing here today, and thousands upon thousands of people around the world would not have been injured by smart meters. So what are some things that all of us can do? This is one of the most important things, because everyone wants to know how to essentially protect themselves and their families. So the first thing is to make sure we use our cell phones wisely. I mentioned that you don't want to put the cell phone within about 1 inch of the body. The industry's telling us this now. So make sure you use speakerphone, get an air tube headset, and when it's on the body, make sure that you put it on airplane mode, when it's either in the pocket or sometimes in the bra. And when it comes to kids, we don't want to have kids use cell phones, but if they must, then please teach them how to use these wisely. We can wire our homes. This is, most people don't need Wi-Fi in their home. So move towards Ethernet, move towards fiber optics, and if you must have Wi-Fi, make sure you turn it off at night. You can get a simple timer so you don't even have to think about it. When it comes to kids, we want to reduce their exposures as much as possible. So if they use an iPad, put all of the data on the iPad and then turn the Wi-Fi off. In schools, I simply do not think we need to have Wi-Fi in schools because we're filling those classrooms with microwave radiation. We can have amazing technology, but it can be wired. And this is where I think we're going to have to go. When it comes to the smart meter and the smart home, I recommend you opt out. I've had wealthy, early adopting families contact me who went all in on the smart home, and they ended up getting sick within a few months. So this is something that affects families, and I just recommend that you don't go down this path because it's a technology we do not need. And one of the last things I want to, solutions I want to give today is to create a safe place to sleep, because this is one of the most important things, because this is when your body rejuvenates, and it's when you can make sure that everything's off. So turn off all your wireless devices, unplug things. If you have a baby monitor, I actually recommend that you turn that off, especially at night. I just do not recommend those for kids. And if you do these things, I know many people who've ended up sleeping better. They have a much clearer during the day, and their fatigue is much less. So this is something which I recommend everyone can do. So in conclusion, I want to say that this is a problem that we can solve. There's tremendous people around the world working on this right now. And I believe we're coming to a tipping point where enough people realize that this is an important topic and that there are solutions. So I recommend that you share this with the people who are closest to you. Because if enough people wake up to this issue, then industry will start creating safe technology. And once they do that, our entire society can move towards a healthier future. Thank you.
Thoughts, reactions? Eye-opening? This is a thermal image. How many people put their phones either in their front pocket, side pocket, back pocket, bra? Yeah. Okay. If everyone goes into their phones, how many people have iPhones? Okay. You can take out your iPhone right now. I want you to go into settings. I want you to go into general. I want you to scroll all the way down to legal. And then you have RF exposure all the way at the bottom. See it? Oh, about and then legal. So again, it's going from settings to about, then legal, then all the way down, RF exposure. And that's where you have, yeah. Okay, does everybody find it? Everybody found it? Yeah, general, about, legal, and RF exposure. RF exposure, all the way at the bottom. Yep, perfect. And when you click on RF exposure, there's the disclaimer. It emits 1.6. That exceeds in comparison to the standards in Canada and in Europe. It's also linked to a particular phone type. Okay? Certain phones have lower emission rates. You can Google all of it. Okay? You can compare Which phones have the lowest emission rate? Yeah? So I want to show you this slide, even though Jeremy quickly went through it. And the reason being is because I'm a strong advocate for children and women. This is a thermal study, and it underscores the amount of absorption from a 5-year-old to a 10-year-old to an adult, just based on cell phones. Put the cell phone near to their ear, and here's the thorough image. Yeah? Now, 5-year-old is unlikely to have a phone, but you'd be surprised. Let me talk to mommy, let me talk to daddy, right? 10-year-old, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, my godson, age 9, just recently got his phone. This weekend we're going away, we're having a conversation. But teenagers, right? What do they do with their phones? Not only do they live on their phones, but don't they sometimes sleep with their phones underneath their pillows? All night long. You see? So this is why I wanted to give it a little bit more extra attention, just so you can become informed. I know that there are a number of parents out there, teachers out there. Please just educate them on how to use technology responsibly. This is a quote from the former Motorola senior research scientist, Dr. Kane, and he says, "The belief that microwaves cannot cause bond breaking in chromosomes or DNA or damage tissue more generally is quite inaccurate." Is quite inaccurate. This is the former Motorola research scientist. So we've heard all these horror stories about technology. The reality of it is technology is not going away. And again, it shouldn't have to, but we need to just become more informed, aware, alert, and act responsibly. So let's talk a little bit about how it not only shapes our physiological makeup, but also the environment, and what can we do to insulate ourselves against the negative implications of technology. So let's touch on the concept of what we call environmental medicine. It focuses on interactions between human health and the environment, including factors such as compromised air and water and toxic chemicals, and how they cause or mediate disease. This is your hub. This is your umbrella. We need to be mindful of our environment, not just what we can touch and see and smell, but also the unknown, the invisible aspects that still has a direct implication. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about forest bathing. Has anybody ever heard of forest bathing? No. Okay. So forest bathing is huge in Asia and in Europe. And if you haven't heard about it, you've probably done it anyway. How many of you like to vacation out in the mountains? Raise your hand. Yeah. Where there's lots and lots of trees and shrubberies and fresh air. Okay. When you come back from these vacations, how do you feel? Recharged, yes? Relaxed. There's a reason for it, and it's biological. How many of you like to go ahead and spend time on the beach? Okay. Let's concentrate first on the mountainsides, and I'll tell you why. This is the reason why we feel so refreshed. It's called phytoncide. And it's a substance that plants actually emit that protects them from germs and insects. But what happens when we as humans inhale it in large quantities over a prolonged period of time? It activates our killer cells in our bodies. And what happens then is that it invokes our immune system. So it actually increases your immune system. So they've had studies with cancer patients, okay, moving them into kind of nature, okay, as a adjunct to other treatments, obviously. And numerous research support forest bathing to lower pulse rates, diastolic and systolic blood pressure, decrease sympathetic neural system activity, lowers cortisol levels, that's the kind of the stress hormone we don't want, increase parasympathetic nervous system activity, which means we can sleep better, increase positive emotions, and reduces negative moods. There have been studies done in Taiwan, in China. One study in Taiwan, about approximately 128 individuals, middle-aged to seniors. They had some maladies, physical maladies, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And they had them walk in the forest for 10 days, but only 2 hours out a day. They did pre and post assessments in order to measure their blood levels. And they also did state mood inventories in order to measure their emotional state at the time. They ruled out for any stimulants and alcohol to avoid any confounds. And this is what came up. There have been research studies done in China, much like the one in Taiwan. In Taiwan, it was a little town called Shita, okay, and it was surrounded by 3 mountains. So you really had a lot of exposure to the phytosin. One of my favorite writers in the world, I feel nothing can befall me which nature cannot replace. We are so far removed from nature. From the concrete and the asphalt to something as basic as the shoe. I'm not saying everybody goes barefooted, okay? But I'm saying that the shoe serves as an insulator that kind of separates you from what we call earthing or grounding, which is our next kind of topic. So earthing, yes? Absolutely. And when we're going to be talking about earthing, okay, and you can ground or earth, okay, with sand, grass, stones. The only thing that you can't ground is asphalt, plastic, and believe it or not, wood, because it's dead. Okay? So what does earthing do? Remember I told you that technology has a propensity for our bodies to collect pent-up electrons. And those electrons, have a direct influence and create, for example, that stinging effect and cross over from one person to the other or one item. It also has a direct implication on our electromagnetic field. So we get charged with a lot of these positive electrons. We are positively charged. So here we have an accumulation. The earth is negatively charged. So what happens when the earth and your skin touch? What happens when a positive and negative meet? Neutralizes, right? So we expel, okay, some of the electrical charges that are pent up. And we have an opportunity to release, yeah? Why is that important? It's important because an excess amount of electrons begins to give rise to free radicals. And free radicals is associated with inflammation. And inflammation is associated with all sorts of autoimmune diseases. The National Institute for Health reports that there are 24.3 million individuals diagnosed with autoimmune deficiencies or autoimmune diseases. But if you go and you Google the autoimmune disease association, they update their numbers all the time. It's at 50 million right now. Do you know why such a large discrepancy? Because the National Institute for Health only has 24 categories of autoimmune diseases. The rest are not cataloged. So when you go to your doctor and something's going on with you, and they go, I don't know, but I'm going to give you something for your symptom. But they don't know what the root cause is. Anybody ever gone to the doctor and the doctor goes, wow, that's interesting, but let me give you something for your insomnia. Wow, that's interesting. Let me give you something for the high blood pressure. But they don't know. So there's a lot we don't know. Because a lot of what we don't see, we don't get curious about. Or if it doesn't affect us, right? This is also another thermograph. And this is a case study. It was done by the Chopra Center. 44-year-old woman, chronic back pain. The orange and the red indicate the chronic pain. And after 4 nights, those are the percentages of reduction of pain, sleep, stiffness, and soreness. After 4 weeks, it jumps from 30 to 80% reduction in pain, no sleep interference, and 70% reduction in morning stiffness and soreness. 8th week, gone. Now, is everybody going to respond that way? No, because you have to attribute to individual differences. But here's the one thing that I tell everyone. You have nothing to lose, and you have everything to gain. So how do you ground? How do you earth? Real simple. Take off your shoes and your socks and go walk barefooted on the grass. It's free. Find a patch if you can nowadays, right? Okay. And if you don't have time, I get it. I have a solution for that too. Okay? But we do know that people are feeling better. And we do know that there's been studies that depict benefits of earthing to decrease inflammation, pain, reduce stress levels, and improve circulation. That we do know. This is Dr. Richard Feynman. He is a physicist and a Nobel Prize winner. And he goes on record saying, when the body's potential is the same as the Earth's electrical potential becomes the working agent that cancels, reduces, or pushes away electric fields from the body. You know when he won the Nobel Peace Prize? 1964. So why is it that there's not more information nowadays when technology is such on the rise? So some of you may not have the time to go out and walk around. I get it. There are products that you actually can buy in order to serve as grounding or to mimic grounding. So your house is grounded, I hope. Okay. In sockets, you have 3 holes, if you will, right? The one on the bottom is the ground. Yeah? So, Lena, if you will, we have mats that go underneath your keyboard, and all you got to do is just touch with your bare kind of skin the mats. I have one. I'm one of those people that are fortunate. Thank you so much. I'm one of those people that are fortunate that are very sensitive to the electromagnetic frequencies. So I have this mat under my keyboard, and as I rest my wrist as I'm typing, I am actually grounding. I've also, how does this work though? Let me just show you real quick. You see, you connect this little kind of attachment, and you attach it here, very simple. And then you have this connector that goes to the actual grounding socket. And then this becomes live, electrical current. It's not going to kill you, but by you touching it, it grounds you. So when I am working on my computer for extended periods of time, I am grounding myself and I'm mitigating the influences of not only my computer, but my cell phone that's right around, on my desk, but also the Wi-Fi that's going through the building, plus the towers that are in the area. Speaking of which, you guys come to school regularly. How many of you know how many towers you got going on in 2-mile radius? I just looked it up. 56. Today, there was an application for another tower to be built. Just today, it was submitted. Oh, and there's 156 antennas within a 2-mile radius. And there's going to be more. And that's what Jeremy was saying. It's not going away, but as a culture, we also have to influence our political representatives to engage and to become more informed about the negative implications and to be our voice. So that we want fiber optics as opposed to towers. So that we want safeguards on our smart meters. Does anybody know if they have a smart meter at their house? You do. Here's a remedy. This is a simple way for you to know if you have a smart meter. If it's digital, it's a smart meter. You got it. So this is a recommendation. I did this to my home as well. You take a 13 by 13, okay, aluminum sheath, if you will. You can buy it at Home Depot. It's about what, maybe, I don't know, $9, okay? Cut it out, because they sell them in rolls. Take an O-ring, and you take that 13 by 13, you put it over your smart meter, put the O-ring on top, screw it on, let it go. And what the aluminum does, it insulates the actual smart meter's emission, and it lowers its emission rate. Okay. So, yes? Well, the company doesn't have, you're not doing anything, you're not tampering with the meter. If you tamper with the meter, then you might get legal, attorneys have to become involved, because it's within your right, it's a good point, it's within your right to refuse a smart meter, but here are your options. Ready? If you have an analog meter now, you must write to FP&L saying, I refuse a smart meter. And it's within your right to refuse it. But once they put that smart meter in, it gets tricky to get it out. So you have a choice. You can request to opt out. Like Jeremy says, they're going to charge you a surcharge of $13 extra a month. I believe it to be an investment. However, when I looked into it, I wanted to know all the intricacies and details of this analog meter. Show me what you got. Let me see it in black and white. We'll mail you the pamphlet. We'll mail you the pamphlet. I called 3 or 4 times. No pamphlet ever arrived at my home. So how could I know the difference between an analog and a smart meter if I had nothing as a point of reference? Plus, I was paying $13, per month for this analog meter. Yeah? And the rationale behind it is because they have to have somebody come out there to assess your meter, as opposed to the central tower that simply does the readings. In the spirit of efficiency, we're compromising our health. As you heard Jeremy, it emits thousands of times per day, as opposed to the analog that's only a handful of times a day. Yeah? So that's a safety net, it's insurance. Okay. So here in this website, you have bioenergyproducts.com. I took the liberty of researching every single website out there. They have products such as the mats that I told you and I showed you here. They have throws. They also have sheets. The sheets, I also got some sheets for my own home. They are woven with silver lining. Yeah? You don't feel them. Very, very, very thin silver threads. But it has the same premise. It's hooked up to the electricity, your grounding, and you place it on top, okay? The only thing is you can't have like lotions and so forth, and it has special instructions on how to, safeguard it in order to prolong, its endurance. But it's an investment. But thank you so much. Thank you. Can I get a hug? Thank you so much. Thank you. She intuitively knew my blood sugar's on the decrease. Cookie, awesome. But the most important thing, and I'm going to get to that, is I'm going to tell you just a couple of safeguards for you to leave here tonight so that you can, once again, protect yourself, become more informed, protect your family, and mitigate against the negative implications of technology. Thank you so much. Now, if you do go on this website and you order any product aside from the mat, and you put TDS5, you get an extra 5%. No, I don't get a kickback. They just know that I'm doing these talks, and they want to give that gift to you. Okay? So, environmental safety. Let's talk a little bit about environmental safety and what you can do starting today. Simple practices. We have turn off your router during your evening hours. $5.99. You can get it on Amazon. You know that automatic, timer for your Christmas tree or your Hanukkah bush? You go ahead and you plug that in. You plug it into the outlet with the router. And green pin simply just means on. Red pin is off. Simple as that. Turn it to the actual day of time. Trust me, simple. And what I do is I turn it off at midnight, and I turn it back on at 7 a.m. I'm sleeping. I'm not going to be using the Wi-Fi, so why am I going to have the Wi-Fi going through my entire home? Does that make sense? Increase distance between you and your personal device. I'll tell you a personal story. Didn't make the connection back then. I had restructured my office. And initially my office, my router was across the room from my office. And because of the restructuring, I put the router right underneath my desk. This interesting thing happened. I started over a prolonged period of time. On the left-hand side, it was almost like these little crystallized kind of, it felt as though it was little stabs, you know, very abrasive. If I were to go ahead and just kind of graze my leg, it felt as though there were little pieces of glass underneath my skin. I thought, oh, that's strange. I started to experience also confusion, short-term memory. I became insomniac. I was lethargic. I thought I was losing my mind. And then, because God is good, I came across this research. I shifted my whole entire kind of office. I got myself informed. I got the bed sheets. I got the mats. Within a couple of days, I was back to a pre-morbid level of functioning. But again, I happen to be one of those individuals that's hypersensitive to the electromagnetic frequencies. You may not. Make sense? But if you are, this is a must. This is a must. Your router shouldn't be less than 10 feet away from your body. 10 feet away from your body. For those of you who have your routers in your bedroom, because your computer's in your bedroom out of convenience, try to get it out of there. Because it's constant. Or turn it off at night. Just turn it off at night. Use 3-prong computer plugs. So if you ever have a computer plug that only has 2 prongs, just get a new one. Get the 3, because the third is the ground. Does that make sense? Then we have unplug your devices when not in use. Even when your devices are not in use, they do emit very, very subtle. But again, it's not one device. It's a culmination of numerous devices over a prolonged period of time. So you're not going to go ahead and see it within 24 hours. You might see it 5, 7 years down the road. And you go, wow, how did this happen? And then they won't be able to diagnose it. Does that make sense? So it is an accumulation of these constant exposures over a prolonged period of time. This is a great URL, antennassearch.com. You can put in your address there, and you can see how many antennas, how many towers are within your general location, within a 2-mile radius. That's how I found out that we have 56 antennas, or towers rather, and 156 antennas. Call the utility company and request an analog meter. You can, and we discuss some of the options there. And then the last would be certified building biologists. This is an extreme. It's expensive. They come in, they do a full house assessment, and they really guide you through how to safeguard your home. So I'm coming to the close of this presentation, and I'm ending with safety measures. And the reason I'm ending with safety measures is because they are so important in your day-to-day life, And we take some of these experiences for granted because we are so wowed by technology. Again, love technology, but we need to get curious about that which we do not see or know sufficiently enough about so that we become informed consumers and we take steps to not only protect our own health, our environment, but that of our loved ones. So I want to thank each and every one of you. I am open to questions because I'm sure there might be some questions. In the back, yes. I can't hear you. Can we have, oh, the mic is coming right now. I've got to eat the cookie, you know that, right?
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I also wanted to add that 5G is coming, and 5G is even
It's
more
here.
more scarier than what we have right now, because it's 20 times faster than 4G, but it's 20 times more harmful than 4G.
It's arrived.
And the towers, it's not going to be a tower 2 miles from here. It's going to be a tower every block. So we're going to be exposed everywhere we go, basically, unless you go into the countryside, which when you talked about letting politicians be aware of the issue, the problem is that politicians are in bed with these tech companies. And there is no way for us to stop what's coming. I don't know if you heard the recent problems with China and that company Huawei. They're literally financing 5G in this country and worldwide. So this is a phenomenon. And I'm glad because I've been studying this for a while now, and I'm glad awareness is being spread, because this used to be a fringe topic. I mean, if you talked about this a year ago, people thought you were crazy.
Yes.
You know? So I really want to thank you for the presentation, and it's really good that the word is being spread, because this actually has long-term health effects like cancer. Cancer is on the rise astronomically, and connections are being made between our exposure and the cancer rate. So thank you again.
Okay. Thank you, Alejandro, for sharing that. And I want to just add a little spin to what you said. We put politicians in power. They work for us. And as a result, maybe, just maybe, it takes something like this, something so grossly out of proportion, to kind of stimulate our culture to become more involved in political matters. Without going into politics, but this is, at its root core, harming our environment as a whole. So we are stronger united, but we are 10 times stronger informed.
And to add one more thing, is that dependence that we as modern humans have created on these devices.
Yes.
And it's being incentivized even more every day by making phones literally, you cannot work without a phone in certain areas.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good to raise awareness on the matter.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Oh, wait, let's get her a mic so we can hear her in the back. Yep.
I see a lot of my friends who have kids, and this is like their new babysitter.
Yes.
Kids sit with these things, and they're there, like, because they're quiet. You
Mhm.
know, as long as they're with the tablet in front of them,
Yeah.
they're watching movies, they're doing this, they're doing that. So I'm wondering about the stimulation also, the constant stimulation of watching,
Yeah.
you know.
So it's said that TV watching has a tendency to lower your brain frequency waves. Yeah? So I'm more concerned about the radiation because children, the younger the child, the more water they actually have in their bodies. Oh, can you help here? But they have more waters in their bodies. And what does water serve? It serves as a conduction. So there's more conductivity, and as a byproduct, there's higher rates of absorption. And so when you're looking at a very young brain, we don't know the long-term effects. What we do know is that there are correlations to acting out. There are correlations to irritability, to aggression. There are correlations, but we don't necessarily have a evidence-based approach that says this is the causation. Because people are starting now to become informed.
Yeah, I think it's going to take years before they have the research to back up all the damage that's really happening.
Well, here's the thing, and that's an important piece that I want to share with you guys, because do we have to wait for all of the research to be concerned, even if we have a little bit of the research? Must we wait for thousands of people to become affected? This is something that's common sense. If we have our own personal electrical current that doesn't vibe with technology's current, it's going to cause an impact. If physicists dating back to 1964 were concerned, why aren't we listening now, several decades later? What is it going to take? It's going to take to become more and more informed, for more people to start voting those politicians out of office and putting in politicians that are going to hear, and that they're going to actually fund research in support of the general masses, not corporations. That's what it's going to take. And we can do it, guys. We can do it. We just have to become informed and stay united. There was a question, I believe, back there, Jose. So do you have also the controller?
No.
Oh, you're so good. There was a question, I think, back there. Oh, over here, Jose. Oh, okay.
No, it's just, I saw in internet, thank you by the way, because my daughter was watching the cell phone, right? And what do you think about because she left it, so that was big.
Awesome.
So she was listening, you know,
Wonderful.
so what we were talking here. And the other thing I want to, just to say, it's like there's a chip that you can buy. I don't know if it works. I read some research about it. It's like a sticker that says like it's like capture the radiation. I don't know how serious it is. I just wanted to ask you, but also say that this exists and you can get it in internet.
Yeah, so that's great. There's also, for example, some cards that, how do you say, create a disruption from your credit cards, and so that, because nowadays, I don't have to pickpocket you. I could just stand within 5 feet away from you and zing something, and I get your credit card information. And so they're kind of plated with special materials that disrupts the frequencies, okay, from the gadgets that are used to pick up your credit card. So those are also very similar gadgets that allow a disruption, okay, like it cause an interference, but very, very minimal in comparison to our day-to-day experience. So we have to take measures in multifaceted ways in order to really see an impact. Unless, like Alejandro said, you're going to go out to the country, and not many people, have that as a choice option. Yeah. I want to also piggyback and say your daughter was listening, and that's key. And thank you for my cookie. That's key, because I asked first and foremost how many of you are teachers, how many of you are parents. Teach them while they are young, and when they're young, they'll talk to their peers, and so forth and so on. That's why if everybody in this room had a child, and they told their child and they educated them, what do you think would happen? It would start to mushroom out, you see? So the more people that become informed, teachers, you are one of the most influential people on this planet. You're taking care of our future. Teach them well. Teach them responsibly. Teach them the good and the shortcomings of technology. There was also another comment, I think, yeah? Right there.
I just wanted to briefly comment, because when I came to this presentation, I thought it was going to be totally different. And it just really surprised me, the information that you brought with. What I thought that was going to be presented today was on the effects of technology and mental health, but in a different way, in terms of your brain and the reward circuit. Like right now, social media is something that it's going around, and it affects our brain in a way that, I mean, I had no idea. So let's say right now there's a big craze with Instagram, Facebook, and likes. You know, when you get a like, you feel like, wow. And then I found the research was explaining when you get a like or you get just certain views, how the dopamine receptors in your brain, in the reward circuit, affects just like your mood, your happiness, and what you said was really great. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So again, those are reward systems in our bodies, and that's what most of the people are gravitating their research on. That's the scope of technology, but not the physiological demise, long-term, of technology. So it's like the big elephant in the room that's nobody's talking about. Yeah? Anybody else? Questions or comments? No? Anyone? No. Okay. Well, if anyone wants to approach me after the presentation, you want a list of resources, books, you can feel free to either email me, talk to me personally. I have some business cards with my email on it, okay? And I'll be happy to go ahead and answer your questions, send you materials, resources, anything that you'll need. But please, I hope this evening the presentation has broadened your scope a little bit of awareness, and that it keeps you curious about the up and coming technology. Thank you very much. You've been great.
Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Students, please make sure you sign out at the table. Those of you receiving CEUs, make sure you sign out and fill out your evaluation form. Thank you and good night.
Oh my goodness. You were listening. You were listening, weren't you?
Can I keep her?